Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Saturday morning at 10:43. Pretty nice December day here. Pretty cool out, I believe, but hope everyone's doing good and is having a good start to the weekend. So yeah, I've been posting a lot of videos here up on the Film Fanatic channel. Most of the time, what I've been doing more so recently, I've been basically setting up the videos as premieres to kind of break up things. And always, I've been in a routine of recording videos almost every day. Sometimes I used to post them right away after they were done. I still do it occasionally, but mainly what I've been doing is just kind of recording videos as I go and then setting them up as premieres to kind of break up things a little bit. Always trying to bring variety. Lately, I've been, into it's always my thing. It's always my jam. It's my main thing that I always go back to, and that's all things, low budget and exploitation. So that is, to me, it's the ultimate form of entertainment when it comes to films. So last night, today's a big show on a movie that I saw last night, and along with kind of the review of this movie, it was my first time seeing it. My first time, I had never heard of it before. So along with the review for this movie, there's kind of a lot to unpack for what it is about I don't know, the experience and kind of the mood of the room, of the folks that were there, the setup, the whole thing. So it was probably about 3 or 4 days ago. I came across there's a really awesome brew pub here in Maine called the Poor Farm, and it's in Union, Maine, and it's my favorite place as far as it's probably my favorite beer brew pub to go to. Beer beer pubs and brew pubs are all over the place here in Maine. They, probably about 6 years ago, 5 years ago, it exploded. That whole thing where all of these little breweries were starting their own little businesses, and it really expanded quickly. It took off, and if you like good beer and you like good quality beer or delicious beer, it's amazing. But the Poor Farm has been around for probably about maybe 6 years, 5 years or so, probably like 6 or 7 years at this point. The they're definitely my favorite place as far as the beer that they make. It's just amazing. My favorite beer to get there is the Teleporter. It's just awesome. And Poor Farm is an amazing spot anyway because they have music pretty much more or less year round. They're closing, I guess, for a little while this winter. I think after this week they're gonna take a little break and then be open again for the spring. But they have lots of music there and different kinds of events, and they're great. It's a beautiful location. It's right in Union, Maine. I've gone there a lot to see music, and I have been fortunate to play lots of gigs there over the last few years. We usually play there a couple times or so over every year with Quantum, and I've played there with a few other bands. And again, I've also like gone there a lot to see bands play and friends that I know that have bands that will play there. So, but they the other day, about 3 or 4 days ago, they were having this like film series where they were going to be showing these kind of basically these like super low budget Christmas exploitation movies. And they showed a movie last night which I never heard about, and it's Jesus, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, and it's a 1964 movie. And basically, the whole thing was that they were going to show this movie and have like a pause, like a discussion about the movie, midway through, and It was this whole like funny thing, and I was like, this is awesome. Like this is something that is this is made for me. So I was super excited to go check it out. So I went last night, and it was great. It was hilarious. It Bill, who is the kind of the owner, the curator of this whole event, he was encouraging people to like talk to the screen and yell at the screen, because back in the day when these films, and this movie was without a doubt the a, a pure exploitation movie. Back in the day, when drive-ins, grindhouse, that's where the whole grindhouse term came from, was from like the late 60s, especially the 70s, and especially the 80s, early 80s. These theaters that were opened up, that were these movie theaters that were around the country at the time, and then also drive-ins. They had this series of where you would you pay a ticket, and it was really cheap back then, but you would see, for that price, you would see sometimes 3 or 4 movies. It's hard to believe that people would do that, like where you would sit, because how people's habits are so different now. But you would pay a ticket, pay for your admission fee, and then there'd be a bunch of trailers, and then it'd be at least 2 or 3 movies that you would see, and usually they were all these exploitation movies, a horror science like a horror science fiction movie, or some kind of giallo film, some kind of action exploitation movie, some really sleazy movie, and it would be the whole experience. And it's always funny now, like where people, and and I see it as a concern or a thing, but often now people complain about you know the length of movies, saying that movies are too long. And I think to a degree, they some movies are definitely overly long, but you know, but people complain about that all the time, and then you know, and it's just funny because at that time when the grindhouse thing was a regular part of the movie going experience, people would spend a whole day, a whole night in a movie house or a drive-in and just experience the whole thing. And but at the same time, people like to binge watch movies and TV shows. Well, they'll watch an entire series or a whole season or whatever at home. And so it's kind of funny that there's that argument. And then other people who do that, who do participate like more or less exclusively in streaming, their argument is, well, you can pause the movie, you or the TV show, and you can go, make dinner or make food, or go to the bathroom. It's not quite the same thing, but it is. I feel like it's a little bit of that debate, or that angle is kind of a contradiction, because I think people still do that. I know people that will sit down and watch a TV show for 6 hours straight, and whatnot, but yet they'll complain that a movie's too long. I don't know. I mean, I get that you can pause it, whatever. So, yeah, so I was super excited. I had never seen this movie before, and it was really funny. The whole grindhouse thing, again, that's where the term grindhouse came from, was that these theaters would grind movies out, basically. 3 or 4 of these, like, sleazy exploitation movies, or what have you. So that's where the term kind of grindhouse came out of. And so that style of filmmaking is my favorite. And Bill was really funny. The owner was like saying, well, because typically now when you go to the theater, it's kind of encouraged for people to be quiet and respectful and turn off their phones and don't talk and blah blah blah. Don't be vocal, because you're gonna impede on on people's experience of that film. So now it's very different. But there's something to be said about that bygone era, because people were, during the grindhouse time, people were participating in the experience, and so there were, all the classic stories of what you would hear people say about what it was like, where people back in the day were yelling at the screen and saying, all of these outrageous things, and reacting, in a very vocal way as to what they were seeing and experiencing. It was very much a communal thing, and it was, totally interactive. Whereas now, that's not really accepted in a movie theater. It's very different. I guess the behavior that one has at a theater, that is acceptable and is now unacceptable. But that used to be a regular occurrence. It was an experience back, at the heyday and the time of this, this amazing time period. I've often said if I had a time machine, that would be one of the times I would, go back to. Would be to experience the time in New York during, on 42nd Street when all the sleazy movie theaters were around, and you could go and see all of these, just trashy movies. Um, that would be, that would be a time and place that would probably be the first thing I would do, which is pretty funny. But so Bill was encouraging people before he started playing this movie. He was encouraging people to interact with this movie. And again, I never seen this movie before, and this movie was fucking awesome. I loved it. I never heard of it before. Totally trashy, totally ridiculous, and it's a sci-fi, kind of take on the whole kind of Christmas classic story of Santa Claus. And it's, super low budget. It's totally trashy. It's totally ridiculous. It's super bizarre too. And it has this the my favorite part of this film was the kind of the climactic ending. That's like this kind of this battle scene, and that involves lots of toys and gadgets, and it's kind of one of those things you have to kind of see to believe because it's so utterly ridiculous and hilarious. And the people there were just totally were into it. People were talking. Bill had also commented that he he was really surprised at the amount of people that showed up. There was probably about 20 people or so. He was picturing, you know, because of the absurdity of this movie and just the trashy nature of this film, that maybe like two people would show up, and that kind of thing. But there was actually a pretty good audience, and it was great. It was hilarious. They had popcorn, and people were, yelling, commenting, and it was, he even brought up the whole thing of, the classic Mystery Science Theater 2000, where you have the two Martians and they're commenting, and that's a classic show, one of the best shows. But that show, that format was basically you had these two characters, puppets, and a robot. They're It's like a running stream of consciousness or commentary and they're watching these exploitation movies. And that's the whole premise of the show. He was encouraging that. So, and it was great. It was super fun, totally ridiculous. I had never heard of this movie. It really reminded me of some like classic. It was putting out some serious like classic Herschel Gordon Lewis vibes. And Herschel Gordon Lewis is, I just did a show recently on some of his films, and he's one of my favorite directors in the world of exploitation. He's probably my favorite director in the world of exploitation overall. He is, probably, for what that genre is and what it represents. I think he's probably the most important guy. He was the first man to really show copious amounts of gore and violence on the big screen. And his movies are just so utterly trashy and ridiculous. But anyway, it kind of was putting out those vibes for me, so I was totally digging it. And again, it's so ridiculous and hilarious. And it was a fun experience to see something so absurd. And I totally enjoyed it. And then I started thinking, wow, I would love to track this movie down on Blu-ray. I'm sure in this day and age, it's definitely possible to find this movie on Blu-ray and 4K because of the explosion of all of these boutique labels that are putting out all of these incredible incredible movies. So I'm sure it's going to be, or would be, super easy to find this movie. And it came out in '64, and I've been on this kick of when I got really into collecting Blu-rays, and especially around exploitation movies, I started more or less seeking out like slasher films. Those are my favorite, and those flourished in especially the '80s. And then over the last few years, I've been kind of tracing it back further and further, and I have discovered lots of amazing films in the '60s and even in the late '50s. Some Japanese exploitation movies that I found that came out in the late '50s. So I love that as a fan, as a film fanatic. When I discover some films or some directors that I really love, I love to try to like trace it back. You know, where did the origins of this kind of genre come from? So I've been discovering all kinds of movies from that time period, you know, '80s, '70s, '60s, and then and before. And so this was a great film from that amazing time period. And again, it's hard to believe that this you know often when I see a movie like this where it's so utterly ridiculous but entertaining as all hell, I'm just like kind of dumbfounded. I'm like, wow, how did this fucking movie get made? And again, I haven't looked it up, but I could probably find this movie on Blu-ray or 4K. I'm sure, with all the amazing companies out there, Severin, Mondo Macabra, Arrow, so many great companies that are Vinegar Syndrome that specialize in all of this amazing crap. I'm sure this exists. I'm sure it's probably easy to find. And things that I would say arguably are probably movies that are arguably even more obscure than this movie that you could find. So it's insane, but it's amazing. Lately, I've been on a canon kick, and I've been watching a lot of the old school '80s, ninja movies. Last night I watched Michael Dudikoff's American Ninja, which I just love, and I love those movies. They're so terrible and cheesy and but amazing. So the movie itself, the whole experience was awesome. But aside from that, it was kind of weird. It was kind of a weird experience. And aside from that, it was, well, to be honest, it was kind of terrible. And I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't go there again. And I don't mean any disrespect to the Poor Farm or Bill, because I think it's an amazing spot. I think Bill is just such an interesting guy, and he's awesome, and he's really helped our band, Quantum, develop. I have gone there to see lots of music. They make the best beer around, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not like trying to burn a bridge, but I'm just trying to be honest about, since I'm a fan, and this is like a film, and I do have this fanatical view of film, but I have strong opinions around it, and that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I am free to admit my taste is up my ass, and that's fine. I accept it and take it for what it is. But outside of the actual movie experience, it was a weird, actually seeing the movie and experiencing it. Outside of that, it was kind of weird, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I wouldn't go there again to see a movie. One of the things that I was really turned off by was that basically the movie was projected from YouTube. So Bill, they had a projector set up, and he had his phone set up or iPad or whatever, and then he had the movie itself, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. It was projected. It was on YouTube, and it was just projected on a wooden wall. Like, that's literally all it was. And so from a technical standpoint, I mean, the quality of this movie, and again, I didn't know anything about this situation or what this would entail. I just was excited to see the movie, and the movie itself was fucking awesome. But everything else around it was like really weird, and I didn't know anything, any info about what how they were going to show a movie or where they were going to show it or whatnot. And so outside of the actual experience, from a technical standpoint, I mean, it was garbage. Like it was so bad, and I'm like, I was kind of like, what the fuck, really? Like this is shit. This is trash. Like anybody can do this. I mean, it's like sitting on someone's couch and watching a movie on their iPhone or something. I'm like, so the quality was just total shit. I mean, total garbage. And then he had this tiny little speaker set up that was not great at all. It was just like a bad car stereo or a bad car speaker, and it was just shit, garbage. It was terrible. And then, so I kind of couldn't believe that that was the way we were seeing the movie. I was just like, really, like what the fuck? And then I asked Bill after the movie, what, how did he hear about this movie, or how did he decide to pick this movie, of all of the exploitation movies that exist. And he said pretty quickly, he's like, well, I just randomly came across this movie, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. I randomly came across it on YouTube, and I watched. He said he watched like 2 to 5 minutes of it, and then shut it off. And then he was like, "Okay, I'm going to do this show. I'm going to show this at the Port Farm." So he had never seen it, and I was just like, "Wow, really? Like people do that, especially people who are like putting on a presentation or an event." I was like, "Wow, really? That's kind of crazy and super bizarre. More bizarre than this movie." Which I didn't get that. And then the other thing that was so weird was that like people were into the movie, but I kind of felt like, and I kind of got the impression from Bill and then the other people that were there, was that it was like um, they were there to just kind of, I don't know, make fun of the movie, and what Bill was trying to do, the vibe that I got was that he was kind of like daring people to like be able to actually sit through this pile of shit and see how they could manage it. And it was like kind of this dare. And that everybody there had this vibe of like, let's just kind of shit on this movie as much as we kind of can. And but yet still have a fun time. And it was weird. It was like that was the impression I got, was that he was like daring his friends to like watch something that he felt was really awful. He also said, and again, he didn't even see this movie. He saw it for like 2 minutes, 5 minutes before and then he decided to show this movie. And I had come across this movie or this event on the Poor Farms Facebook page, which is, they are a very, very popular brew pub, rightfully so, in the area. And Bill's a very cool guy and popular guy, so they get a lot of traction with, social media, and he's pretty good with social media. So he also said that this was like one of the worst movies ever made. But then I was like, well, technically it didn't even had you'd never seen this, you never watched it before. But I felt like it was more of like a dare to see like, okay, this movie is such a pile of shit, or this, it could be anything in art, like this book is so terrible, or this painting is so bad, or this band is so bad. So I just want you to like, I'm gonna have my friends over, and I just want to throw it on you guys and kind of torture you guys and see how long you can take it. That's what I felt like was going on. And it's like, on my perspective, right? It's like, I my first love, again, I love all kinds of films and all kinds of art. I try to have a real big appreciation for all kinds of things. But my love, my passion is in the world of exploitation. I love the low budget trash. And so it's funny because my angle of it is, it's like, yeah, I totally accept it that these movies are technically they're garbage. They're riddled with like bad editing, bad direction, shoestring budgets or no budgets, practical effects, um, all kinds, like basically everything that, quote unquote, would not work in a Hollywood film. These movies kind of exemplify that. They're pretty sleazy, they're weird, they're strange, they're super ridiculous. And I acknowledge that. That for me is why I love these movies. But outside of that, I generally love these fucking movies. I think they're so fucking fun. To me, it goes right to the core as to why I love films, because first and foremost, I go to a movie to escape the mundane. Whether I've had a bad day or good day or whatever, or I'm in a good mood or bad mood, whatever it is. I'm going to see a movie to suspend my belief and escape, go into this other world, this alternate reality for 2 hours. That's what I want, and I feel like these movies, and again, there's all kinds of variables around that, but the experience, that's what I want. And I think that's generally why anybody goes to a movie, or why they put on an album of their favorite band, or read a book of their favorite author, or go to a art house, or go to a art opening. It's that, at face value, they want that kind of direct experience and that immediate experience. And I think that's very simple, and it's a universal thing. And for me, these movies exemplify that. And so because these movies for me are so absurd and so ridiculous, I also feel like these movies, I generally feel like I love big budget Hollywood films. The last few months, I've been doing a lot more coverage of more quote unquote commercial movies. And I love those movies. But for me, I generally feel like big budget Hollywood films and big budget Hollywood directors are generally everything, especially now, I feel like everything is so serious. Everything is, I don't know, kind of has an agenda, but everything is so serious. Everything is very stark, very dark, and is just in its very nature and tone. There's an area around of where it can lose its entertainment value and have fun. A lot of, I feel like it gets to this point of where so many films that come out and so many directors start taking themselves too seriously, and they can't laugh at themselves and have a little bit of levity to it. I think, for instance, I was talking last night with my girlfriend about Christopher Nolan's films, and I love his movies. He's a great director. But Oppenheimer, his last movie, and a couple of other things he's done, they're just so goddamn serious that they're too dry, and I can't get into it because there's no. It's almost like some kind of academic course. There's nothing. It's so dry, and there's no real entertainment value. And I feel like these wonderful trash movies are such a great alternative to that. And I truly feel that they really reflect the completely insane reality of the world that we live in, the reality of the world that we wake up to every day, because our our world in reality is completely batshit crazy. Socially, economically, I mean, globally, all of these things that are happening at the same time, it's completely fucking insane. And as a person, obviously it's very hard to um, cope with that. And I feel like these movies completely reflect our reality of how just absurd things are in our real reality. And these movies provide the ultimate escape from all of this kind of imposed bullshit that we have on our backs in our society, in this dystopian age that we live in. And I feel like these movies poke fun at everything, but then they also have some serious things to maybe say. And but none of the directors, the films, they're not made to be taken so seriously. There's a levity to it. There is, like, you know, there's some humor. The directors, the actors, the creators can kind of laugh at themselves while they're creating something. And there can be very, serious things in these films, but there's still some area of levity, like with slasher films, giallo films, all the exploitation movies. You have your crime films, you have, just all of these incredibly absurd subgenres: nun exploitation, crime exploitation, horror exploitation, sex exploitation. You have all of these different subgenres in this genre, but there's a levity to it, and it's so ridiculous, and there's an absurdity to it that you just can't take it seriously. And the filmmakers, they set out to make something, I think, in some ways, something good, but they're not. They can make fun of themselves. There's a little bit of levity to that, and that's why, in a nutshell, why I love this genre so much. Why I acknowledge that it's total trash, but for me, it gives me that experience. So that's why I generally really love this shit. Why I really feel like, even when it comes to, like I said at the top of the show, talked about Herschel Gordon Lewis. In some ways, you can make the case or argument that, well, Herschel Gordon Lewis wasn't really even a filmmaker. You know, when you think of, say, Stanley Kubrick, who is my favorite director of all time, or Akira Kurosawa or David Lynch, any of these other iconic directors that I love to death, and to kind of take, say, Herschel Gordon Lewis and put him in that category, or Christopher Nolan even, because everything that he was kind of doing was outside of that completely. So you can make that case that he wasn't really a filmmaker. But I do think, in the respective genre, I think he very much was, and he was an iconic figure. But he was totally, you know, just this trashy ad guy. He was just in the world of exploitation, just trying to, like, making money, trying to make money off of, bigger budget films that were popular today, and he was trying to, like, cash in on it, make these trashy films and put them out quickly, and just have fun, and just do it in this completely absurdist, like, ridiculous way. Hiring actors that, hiring people off the street to be in his films, and but it's just the rawness of that whole genre and his style, that's why I love it. And so the sense that I got from the people last night was that they only have this view of it. Like, they generally are not into these movies, and it's just like, this running joke of, well, let's just make fun of it, and yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to like be kind of, well, be outraged on how terrible it is. But that's all that I felt. That's all that they. That was the vibe that I got, was that's how they view these kinds of movies, and this movie in particular. You know, I had an experience last year where I bought one of the other subgenres in the world of exploitation that I've been really getting into, and I really really love, and I've been buying more and more of those movies, is the shot on video genre, which is a really amazing, and I look at it as like kind of a subgenre in the world of exploitation, because the shot on video thing, or is basically all of these like uber low budget trash movies that are actually shot on VHS tape, and they're transferred to video or digital, and they're just amazing. Like they're so gonzo crazy, and just so like you just can't believe some of these movies get made, but they're so entertaining and so fun. And one of my favorite movies in that genre is um, Suburban Sasquatch, and it's one of the most ridiculous movies ever made. But I think that movie is, I kind of feel like in that genre, it's like the Godfather of shot on video, and it's just like it's a sight to behold. And I brought that over to a friend's house. Um, I think it was last year or earlier this year. A friend of mine who is also into movies, and he loves horror films just like I do. He's not as into exploitation movies as I am, but he's open to a lot of movies. He does love slasher movies. And we had one or two mutual friends that were in town visiting, and I know she was also into a lot of these kinds of movies also. And she had an interest into, taking a deep dive in a lot of these exploitation movies. So I was like, wow, I just bought Suburban Sasquatch through a recommendation from a friend, and I just fell in love with this movie, and it's just amazing. So I brought it over there a friend's house. He was gonna, it was like a dinner night, and we were gonna have a movie night, and I brought it over there, and we started watching it, and everybody just was like, they were just flabbergasted, and they ended up we ended up having to shut the movie off because everybody hated it, and everybody thought it was just garbage, and yeah, it went over like a fart in church. And I'm sitting there watching it, I'm laughing my ass off, I'm totally into it. Everybody else is just like, for about 2 minutes they were kind of chuckling and thought it was, totally ridiculous. But then it wore off, and they were just like, "This movie sucks," or blah blah blah. And then so we couldn't. Even, so we ended up not making it. I think we got 30 minutes into the movie, and I was just like, "What? Come on, guys! Like you're clearly, not getting this," and that's fine. And and the thing is like I didn't bring the movie over there to ruffle feathers or to like, well, let's see how, let's push the threshold and see how much of this shit they can take. It wasn't that. It was like, no, this movie is so fucking ridiculous and insane. And but again, I felt like, well, it's, if you get lost in the movie, it's so fucking fun. It's like going to a fucking great amusement park. And that's where the levity is for me. And so, but those folks didn't get it. And I know for me, I brought that film over purely because I love that film and I thought it would be just entertaining as fuck. Because it's a perfect movie to watch with friends while you're drinking beers and just like, you know, and you want to just, get your rocks off. Like this movie is made for that. I didn't bring it over to be like, well, I'm gonna intentionally try to like ruin people's nights, ruin everyone's night, and see how far people can, like, how long can they take this. So I kind of felt like that's kind of what it was like last night. It was weird, and and I just, again, I could not believe that he showed it on fucking YouTube. I was talking to my girlfriend last night, and it's like I have a big issue around streaming, watching movies in the streaming world because of the quality, because of all of the compression that is used on a movie for that technology. The quality sucks. Like, dark scenes are so dark. The audio is off. It's very, very. There's a few occasions where I thought it was pretty good, but generally it's like it just sucks. And it's like I rather see a movie in the theater or get a really good Blu-ray or 4K version of that film. And the other thing that's always funny about, which I don't understand, is it kind of goes back, or kind of it goes into the whole era that we live in. That, like, you have these like hardcore people that are like making VHS popular again, and they're like, well, when you see a lot of these, a lot of these exploitation movies and horror movies that came out in the '70s, people initially saw them either in the drive-in or the grindhouse, in the theater, and then when VHS came along, that was the other way that people saw them, and suddenly you had these movies that you could rent on tape. But a lot of those movies were basically banned in the '70s. They were, a lot of movies were banned because, and they were deemed by the politicians of the time as these movies that were, leading society, down this like life of crime. And the video nasties came to be, of where all of these movies were basically, because of the conservative Christian right wing organizations and how politics were back then, and kind of how it is becoming again. They were deemed these, like essentially offensive smut films, so they were banned. But then, so a lot of these movies came back on VHS, where they were, basically burned copies, or copies of a copy, and then they would be put into a store. Sometimes re-edited. The gore and the sex would be cut out. And that's when a lot of, like in my generation, that's how I first saw and heard a lot of these movies. I got exposed to them. So you have this, like, kind of mindset now where people are like, well, the only way you can watch any Herschel Gordon Lewis movies or Lucio Fulci movies is you got to watch it on a shitty VHS, because that's the way it's meant to be seen. And that argument is complete and utter bullshit, because when those movies were originally released in the theater or in the grindhouse time, the quality was immaculate and pristine, like amazing. So there was all shot on, it was all shot on film, and the quality was amazing, the audio, everything. And VHS is like one of the worst ways to actually technically watch a movie. So when you're getting like, if you take, for instance, House by the Cemetery, iconic film by Lucio Fulci. I grew up watching that movie. I saw that movie on VHS, and it's one of my all-time favorite horror exploitation movies. Probably my favorite Lucio Fulci film. I grew up watching it on VHS, but then I bought it a few years ago on Blu-ray, and it was like, what? Like, I could not believe the quality, and it's like amazing. And Blue Underground, that is a company that was started by Bill Luswig, who is one of my favorite directors in the genre. He directed the Maniac Cop movies and Maniac, which is my all-time favorite slasher movies. He was an incredible director for many years, and then he kind of retired from directing and started his own boutique label, Blue Underground. And I saw an interview with him where he said, no, like, these new Blu-ray releases, 4K releases of these exploitation movies, this is how the experience would have been if you saw it in the theater, because it's unfiltered, it's pristine quality. So this whole idea of the shittier way that you see the movie, like, watching on fucking YouTube, or like watching on VHS, that whole thing of like, well, that's part of the nasty aesthetic, is all complete and utter bullshit. So, but anyway, that was a very long rant. So, but this movie, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, was incredible. I would totally love to see it on Blu-ray and to see a really good quality version of this movie, because it was bonkers and it was hilarious, super strange. I kind of felt like I was high on drugs watching this movie, even though I just was having a couple of beers. But amazing film. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.